welcome to today's webinar hosted by Pragmatic Works. My name is Nick Lee. I am a consultant and trainer over here at Pragmatic Works. I've done many of these webinars before. I do a lot of Azure Everyday videos. If you guys ever check out our Pragmatic Works YouTube channel, you should see me around there quite a bit. My email is nlee@pragmaticworks.com, and my Twitter handle is @backtosql. And today's webinar is on what's new in the Power BI service and some settings and features you might just not quite know about or know how to use yet. So that's the topic of today. A lot of times on these webinars that I do, a lot of times I'll do some high-level ones. I'll do some more detailed ones, some like DAX-oriented webinars where we really get into the nitty-gritty, like programming and even mQuery. But today we're taking a step back a little bit and doing a high-level type of, features type of webinar of what's kind of going on in the Power BI service. So one of the things that gets brought up a lot when we do a lot of our engagements here at Pragmatic Works is we have a lot of customers and we're constantly working with someone, and a lot of times there's features that get rolled out in the service all the time that not everyone's super comfortable using or know what's changed, or sometimes something is just suddenly changed and it's different and you have to figure out how it works or what can you do about it. And that's kind of why what inspired me to kind of host this kind of webinar today. So before we get into the nitty gritty here, let's just give you a little bit of introduction about myself if you don't know me. First of all, I'm a super huge nerd. I love video games and Dungeons and Dragons and data analytics. So in fact, that's actually kind of what got me into Power BI to begin with, is that I would build, I study a lot of video games. I probably study more video games than I play them. That's how much of a nerd I am. So anyways, that led me to getting into utilizing Power BI and other data analytics tools. So I'm a trainer and consultant over here at Pragmatic Works. I've been here for a couple years now and loving every minute of it. I am in some books, mainly like Power BI style books. I'm not so much an author as I am a technical editor, if you're not aware what a technical editor is, a lot of times I will not like grammatically edit books and check them, but check like demos and make sure something logically makes sense, or maybe even create demos for books. We've teamed up a couple times over here at Pragmatic Works and written some books as like with me, Devin Knight, Brian Knight, Mitchell Pearson, Manuel Quintana. A lot of us kind of teamed up on some books around here, so you might see my name scattered about in some of the stuff we work on. I also participate in local user groups such as the Power BI user group here in Jacksonville, as well as the Jacksonville SQL Server user group, even SQL Saturday events I participate in pretty regularly and host panels there, so it's a lot of fun. And again, my Twitter is @backtosql, so follow me on there. I post a lot of updates on many things Power BI related, anything in the Microsoft BI stack. I post stuff, anything Azure kind of updates. I post fairly active on Twitter, so see me there. And if you have any specific questions or questions, you can always email me at nlee@pragmaticworks.com. And lastly, my blog is backtosql.wordpress.com, so check me out there for any kind of new updates or news or any kind of tips and tricks that I might post now and then. But anyways, let's kind of get into the agenda for today. So it's, like I said, it's a pretty high level type of webinar today. We're going to be going over some feature changes and additions that came to Power BI recently, not literally this month, over the past few months is kind of what we're going over, some cool stuff and new features and being able to utilize some things there. And kind of this own little section that we have here, we have new capacity settings that we're going to be talking about for Power BI Premium users, as well as some new and different refresh options that we have for our data and data sets and reports and whatnot. So we got some pretty cool stuff that we're going to be going over here. So first off, let's start with, make sure I'm not missing any questions. No, okay, no questions so far. So let's start with talking about our feature changes and additions. So one thing that if you logged into the Power BI service the past few months, you'll notice that there's a setting called the new look. Now the new look is there's an option you can toggle on and off. That's one of the main feature changes and additions we're going to be talking about here. We also have a new report subscription option is monthly. Now this is something that was highly requested. It was pretty high up on the Microsoft boards, because previously there was only like hourly, daily, or weekly updates and subscriptions to reports. So what that means is if a report gets updated, it would notify you every single day that the report was updated or changed or whatnot. And now you can actually set up monthly subscriptions to a report to see if there's any changes. That way you're not getting flooded, but you still know that a report is staying up to date on a month-to-month basis. That's something pretty requested by, like higher level stakeholders throughout a company. Also, there's some bookmark changes that we're going to be going over as well. So bookmarks in the service have gotten quite a bit of an overhaul. There's a lot of new things there, good and bad, in my opinion. Mostly good, but it kind of changed how I kind of design my reports as well. So that's something that we're going to take a look at and consider. So first up, let's take a look at the new look here. So this is just a simple screenshot that I took of a report that I'm kind of working on, that I have here rather. And there's been quite a few different changes in the new look. There's some new features. Not only does it like look differently, and it's not just a new look. It doesn't just look, but it's some new features that are available. For instance, we have new metadata that we could view. We have a new type of way we can navigate between pages of a report. Now this was a pretty big deal because before it was just at the bottom and it wasn't super visible to switch between pages of a report. Now we have this kind of vertical navigation, that pane that we have on the left side that we could use through. We also have a simplified action bar. So before, in the old look of the Power BI service, you would have this action bar at the top, and it was just, different buttons across the whole entire screen, and it was very easy to get overwhelmed what was there. Since then, it's been simplified in this new look, and it's a lot easier to navigate. We have a new filters experience where we can actually see all the filters that's being applied to each individual visual. Now, this was something that was released on the Power BI desktop first. So like actually in the Power BI desktop, you can see this kind of new filters experience, but it is something that's visible now actually in the service, and it's pretty easy to use. Also, just various improved colors and icons throughout the service itself. So real quick, let's take a look at a couple of those different things in a quick demo here and see kind of how it looks. Pretty simple. So first off, we have this is a kind of a report that I'm working on. We do this internal thing at Pragmatic Works where we give shout outs to each other, whether it's, I can give it to my boss, or my boss can give it to me, or I can give it to a coworker or someone to help me out. Basically, we're always trying to, stay motivated with each other, and sometimes we'll even give like awards to each other, like a new pair of headphones, or if someone who has been really getting lots of shout outs recently because they've been extremely helpful. The shout outs aren't just for people doing their job. It's for kind of going above and beyond. It's something that we do here at Pragmatic Works. And this is a little report that I put together that, I figured would be good for this because it's pretty simple and sweet and easy to look at. Actually, this was the one I want to look at here. But for instance, the metadata option that I talked about earlier. So the metadata, if you look at the top of the screen here, if I click this Culture Shoutouts Demo 2 drop down, you can see this metadata here just says this last updated December 9th at 3:58 p.m. That was the last time this was messed with, which was yesterday about 4 p.m. Eastern time by me, Nick Lee, and the title is just a little demo that I had put together here for it. So that's a nice little new feature that we have. It's easy to see, what kind of changes are happening in this report. And here is that vertical navigation I was talking about: culture shoutout, shoutouts given table, shoutouts received table, some different pages that we have in this report that we can navigate to. So currently, if I look at this year, I could see a list of everyone's shoutouts they've got and then all the different topics they have. I can look at the shoutouts given table. So for this year, I can see everyone that's all the shoutouts that someone has given out or handed out, and then back to the main report page here. And if we look at it relatively to how the old look was, if I click that little new look and switch it to off, I can hit skip on this pop-up that pops up all the time. Wait for it to load here. And this is what that report looked like before. Now The report pages are at the bottom. They're not so intuitive to see and to click on. It's not as easy and nice as it was before here in the old look. And this is the old look. Like I said, this isn't something that is very flashy. It's not that great. It's not as easy to navigate around as the new look is. The new look's pretty nice. I think it's a pretty great addition that we have here. Also, like I said, in the new look, a feature that we have is the new filters experience. So what that means is you could actually hover. So if I go to this table on the bottom that says shoutouts given, it works on any visual. I just picked this one arbitrarily. If you look, if I hover over this filter icon, you can see that this filter pops up, and currently this page is filtered on current year. As you can see from here, it says this year is when I have selected. So I have a this year filter on this page, and if I hover over that filter icon, it says is current year's little flag that I made for this filter. So anytime anything gets filtered down, it is shown here. For instance, if I click on Joe Abbott, our shoutouts received leader for this year, if I click on his bar, I can hover over this filter icon, and now it says, hey, this is being filtered down to only show Joe Abbott because we clicked on it. So you can actually easily navigate and say, like, let's say you have a little bit more cluttered type of report than this one here. You can easily tell what's being filtered down by what. So let me close that filter out. There we go. All right. So that's what the new filters experience is like. And like I said, overall, compared to the old look that we were just looking at, there's a lot of improved colors and icons and different things here. It looks a lot better than it did before. I'm just taking a second to look to see if there's any questions or anything in the chat. Nope. So I'm assuming you guys are good so far. This is all pretty simple stuff so far. The next thing I want to talk about is some new refresh options that we have available to us. All right. So as far as refresh options go, cloud-based Power BI files, like cloud-based files that you use, data or data sets, haven't needed a gateway to be able to get refreshed for quite a while now. This isn't a feature that people are always aware of, so it's definitely worth bringing up right now. So again, if you ever have data being used by like anything in the Azure cloud, there's no gateway setup required. You do not have to have a gateway setup. Now, this is a pretty big deal. It makes your life a lot easier, especially if you're just a developer and you're not an admin. This way, you don't have to always synchronize up with the admin at your company to make sure a gateway is set up and signed in with proper credentials and yada, yada, yada for each report that you create. So using cloud-based data is always a really good thing when you're utilizing Power BI refreshes. Now, that being said, OneDrive files that are saved in the cloud, which also means like if you have a OneDrive file saved on your PC and synced with the cloud, which is what I do very often, now those OneDrive files automatically update if any changes have been made. Now, this is pretty awesome. This is a pretty awesome feature. I really like it. Not only do you not need a gateway because it's stored in the Azure cloud, but your Power BI files will sync directly to the cloud as well. Now, this effect happens about once per hour. So once per hour, the Power BI tenant checks to see if your OneDrive file has any changes made to it. And if there are any changes made to it, then it updates that file automatically. I can't iterate how much I really love this feature. I utilize it all the time, and I have a little something to show you guys of that as well, and just here in a couple minutes. But again, to be clear, just to be clear, this does not mean the data gets automatically refreshed once per hour. The report gets refreshed once per hour. So that means if you want a data refresh to happen automatically in OneDrive, you're still going to have to actually open up that Power BI report, refresh the data manually. So like you have to hit that refresh button in the actual Power BI report, and then save that file, and then Power BI tenant checks OneDrive to see if that actual like local file of Power BI desktop, the PBIX file has been changed, and if it has been changed, it utilizes that new version in the report. And I'll go over that again with you guys actually in the service. But again, if you want automatic refreshes to happen, you're still going to have to schedule it. You still have to schedule, like, it's for data. For data refreshes, you have to schedule it if you want an automatic. This OneDrive sync is for local files being refreshed, not the actual data set itself. Also, now we have the capability to utilize Power Automate, which, if you didn't know, that's the official terminology now for Flow. So Flow is no longer Flow. It is Power Automate. Though I will say the official URL for Power Automate is still flow.microsoft.com. That hasn't changed yet, but this is new. It's newly called and officially called Power Automate. But we can use Flow or Power Automate to refresh our data sets automatically. Now this is huge. So for instance, every time a new row in a SharePoint list gets updated, it triggers a flow to refresh that Power BI data set. Yes, you heard that correct. You can use Microsoft Flow to say something like, anytime a SharePoint list gets a new row or a new item or whatever it may be, you can use Flow to automatically refresh that data rather than having to schedule it. Instead of saying, all right, let's update my, this data set, let's refresh it every hour for the whole day. Instead of doing that, you can make it dynamic by saying anytime something's added, let's refresh it. Now, there are some constraints here. The constraints are that if you are Power BI Pro, non-premium, if you're Power BI Pro, you are still limited to 8 times per day. It does kind of utilize those slots in tandem with the scheduled refreshes. So let's say you have 4 scheduled refreshes per day, and then you have, 20 updates to the SharePoint list that you want to happen automatically. Only the first 4 of those are going to go through because you're already using 4 of those 8 slots for scheduled refreshes, or really whatever happens first. It's whatever 8 things happens first is how it's going to work. If you have Power BI Premium, it's a little different though. As you probably know, if you do have Power BI Premium, you can have up to 48 scheduled refreshes per day from the service. Now that is not true for the Flow updates. For Flow updates, if you have Power BI Premium, you actually have an unlimited amount or infinite amount of refreshes you could utilize with Flow per day. Even if you have 100 even if you have 100 updates to a SharePoint list that you want automatically refreshed in your Power BI service, if you have Power BI Premium, that's fine. It works. It's pretty awesome. All right, so let's kind of go over some of these different refresh options that we have here. Let's see. There is a question. It says, make this bigger, it's hard for me to read it. This isn't related to the Power BI service features being discussed in the webinar, but really liking the shout-out principle. What's the workflow for getting the data into Power BI, e.g. Excel document that is updated or something else Power related? That's a really good question. So what we actually have, and I can actually show it to you, is, I don't see a name attached to it, but we actually have a Power App designed that you could utilize on your phone and update it to a SharePoint list, and then we use that SharePoint list. We pull data directly from there into Power BI. And actually, since you asked, I can go ahead and show that real quick, just because I brought it up. And this is the kind of report I'll be messing with the rest of the webinar. So if you're curious, we can go ahead and do that. So give me 1 second. Let me pull up that Power App. All right, so this is the Power App that we have. It looks kind of wonky on web browser, but that's because it's designed to work on a phone as well. But this is how it works. Let me zoom out some so I get the whole thing in here. There we go. So how it works is, we could look at different leaderboards with, being humble, delivering wow, never stop learning, never stop teaching, etc. So this is how it looks, and you can kind of look at them, and you can click this little box and read the quotes and everything like that. And if I want to send a shout out, I hit the send a shout out button. Wait for it to load here. This is a Power App that we designed in-house just for us, and I could choose someone like Brian Knight, and he's the CEO of the company, and he also wrote this Power App. If I click him, I can choose a topic. So like, oh, Brian is really good at communicating, so I could choose communication is key, and then I could write Brian is cool and shout out, good job, Brian, or whatever I want. And I could attach a picture or whatever I want to here, hit send shout out. When I do that, I didn't hit submit, I just hit cancel. It sends it to this SharePoint list that I have open here. And you can see if I sort it by nominated date, if I create a date, so I recently submitted one to my boss, my direct supervisor, Steve Hughes, because he's always very humble and easy to work with, and he's great. And I submitted that there, and then that actually populates here in the Power App. So if I look at this month, you can see that this is the one that was submitted this month by me so far. Typically, most of the shoutouts go in at the end of the month because that's when we do like our monthly, hey, we got all these shout outs for all these, good job everyone. So they always typically go in at the end of the month. That's why there's only one in so far for December. But yeah, so that's our kind of Power App that we use for that. That's a good question. All right, any other questions here? Is it possible to connect to SharePoint Online from Power BI Desktop? Yes, it is possible to connect to SharePoint Online from Power BI Desktop. That's a great question. There's actually a built-in data source for that, connector rather. So here's a empty Power BI Desktop window that I have open here. And if you go to Get Data, if I go to More, you can search for SharePoint. Oh, I typed it wrong. In SharePoint, you can see you can connect to a SharePoint list, you can connect to a SharePoint folder, etc., and you connect directly to it as long as you have the proper access rights and everything. How do we get these new features to show up in our Power BI service? Do we have to actively do something? They should typically automatically be there. It also depends how your administrators are, what they allow, what they don't allow. I'm not sure if the new look is something that gets relegated by an admin on your Power BI service portal. That's actually a good question, something that I'm curious about as well, if that actually can be relegated, because I thought this was just GA. I thought the new look was just generally available for everyone because it just kind of automatically appears for most people. That's something I'd ask your admin if you don't see this new look option here. So what were we talking about again? We were talking about, oh yeah, refresh options. That's right. So to put it in an example, I have this Power BI report, the one that we're just looking at. Let me see if I can pull it over here. This is the Power BI report that we're just looking at, right? This is the same. Oh, it's almost the same one. It's close enough. It's fine. It's pretty much the same one. Not exactly the same, but that's it. Saved on my local machine. If I pull up my Windows Explorer and look in my OneDrive folder, so this is actually my OneDrive folder. I look at OneDrive, Pragmatic Works, and go to New Service Refresh. This is that Culture Shoutouts Power BI file that I have. It's saved in my OneDrive here. You can see the last time I modified it was a couple hours ago. And if I look at my OneDrive, this is actually my OneDrive. You can see same exact information here. In my files under New Service Refresh, I have it completely synced up from the cloud to my machine. That's no problem at all. So if I actually look at my, let's see, which one do I have? I just want to be sure. This is the page I want to be on. Okay, so you can see here that it says the latest date pulled in here is December 9th at 12 a.m. Now, this is just because my data sets doesn't have time on it. It's just dates. That's why it's showing 12 a.m. I could certainly change the format of that to just show the date. That's not a big deal. But as we know, today is the 10th. So I came up with a little mock scenario, even though I messed with this today. I came up with a little mock scenario to make it look like it was last messed with yesterday. As you can see in this report, the latest date says December 9th, which we know isn't true because it's the 10th, and I'm pulling the dates dynamically. But what I did was I just created in my date table for my calendar days, I just set it up to go to today minus 1 day. That's why I'm showing December 9th. But if I change that to get my date table to go through until what it's actually like, which is today, and you can see December 10th, 2019, that's proper. Now, as soon as I hit save here, because this is saved, remember, this is saved actually in my OneDrive, which is locally on my machine. This is going to sync with the cloud, and the cloud is going to notice that it's there. Now, when the cloud notices that it's there, you can actually, when you're actually pulling this report directly from OneDrive, about once per hour, Power BI is going to automatically say, hey, this has been changed, the report was changed, not the data set that we're actually pulling from, not the shoutouts info that we have, but the actual report has changed. So about once per hour, this is going to check and say, oh, there's a change here, let's see what's different. So if you're curious about how to connect while we're waiting for a second here to see if it pops up, how do you connect to Power BI files directly from OneDrive? It's pretty easy. From your workspace, you can go to Get Data. If you go to Get Data down here on the bottom left, let me highlight that so you can see it. You get this Get Data button. There's several ways you can do this, but that's how I do it. And if I go to Files, I want to load a Power BI report from a file. You can see I have OneDrive, SharePoint, local file. You can upload Power BI reports from wherever. If I choose, I want to load from my OneDrive for Business folder, and then, all right, well, these folders are going to pop up and look familiar to you guys. Oh, so I have this one, New Service Refresh is the one that I was messing with. And here's that file. So if I click load here, which I already did, that's what we see. It's connected directly to my OneDrive, as you can see right here from the Power BI service. And because it's connected directly to the OneDrive, about once per hour, it's going to check and see if there's been any changes made. And we can go ahead and see if that's true. It might not happen immediately, just depending on how much load is currently going on in the service. That's a data set, not the actual report. So if I click here, no, it hasn't updated yet, but you guys can take my word for it. It's about once per hour. It's kind of hard to do a live demonstration for this because it's not an immediate thing that typically happens. But you would see this December 10th instead of December 9th populate here. So that's how that works. The next thing I want to talk to you guys about is that really cool new, and this works for anything cloud related, by the way, like anything that's hosted in the cloud, the Azure cloud, and you connect directly to that Power BI file. The Power BI 10 is going to run those checks for you. And again, you don't have to have actual gateway set up for this, as well as scheduling refreshes too. So for scheduling a refresh, to actually refresh the data set, not just a Power BI report, to refresh the data set without working on it, you still don't need a gateway, but you will still need to go in that schedule refresh option. So for instance, if you wanted to schedule the refresh to do it automatically for the data, you would just click this little more options button. There's many ways you can do this as well, but this is how I do it. Click this little more options button, I can hit refresh now if I wanted to, go to schedule refresh, and notice here when I set this up, there's no gateway connection connected currently. There's nothing selected, but it still lets me, it should still let me schedule a refresh. Oh, OneDrive refresh. That's on by default. That's that 1 hour thing I was talking about. Why isn't this letting me do a regular refresh? That's something weird I'll have to mess with later. You don't need gateways for scheduling refreshes, so there must be something going on with the settings here that we don't have time to mess with. But you can take my word for it. You don't need gateways to refresh something from the cloud. That being said, let's check one more time here to see if this updates. No, not yet. All right. So the next kind of refresh thing I want to talk to you guys about is actually using Flow to be able to refresh your data sets. So this is what flow.microsoft.com will bring you to, not literally right here. But again, if you use a Flow to refresh your data sets, you don't have to schedule it. You can say, hey, when something new happens or when this trigger happens, go ahead and schedule it. Go ahead and do a refresh, not schedule, but go ahead and do a refresh when it happens. Now, this is really awesome, again, especially if you have Premium, because if you have Pro, you can only have up to 8, like either scheduled or Flow automated refreshes per day, or Power Automate. Sorry, I keep calling it Flow. It's a new name. You can only have up to 8 total per day if you only have a Pro license. But if you have a Premium license, it is unlimited, infinite number of refreshes that you want. So because of that, we could create a flow here if we wanted to. I could hit this little create button on this left side. I can hit create. You're going to want to make a new template here, automated template. So I can click the automated flow template, and I can call it whatever I want. I can call it Power BI refresh and hit create. Oh wait, I have to choose my flows trigger. So here, just perfect. SharePoint, when a new item is created in SharePoint. This will work for my list. So if I hit create, I could connect to my SharePoint, whatever SharePoint I wanted to, just to show you what it looks like, so I don't have to go through everything here. I can connect to whatever SharePoint that I want to. I can choose whatever SharePoint list that's with it, and then you could add a new step. We could go to, I could search for something like refresh in the next new action for automate. If you're not familiar with Flow or Power Automate, I apologize if it's going too fast, but Flow and Automate's a whole nother topic, so I'm not trying to go too deep into that. But if I type in refresh here, so like, all right, my trigger is when an item is created in SharePoint, and my action is when I want to refresh a data set when that trigger happens. So I could choose like whatever workspace it's in. Like for instance, I could even choose my workspace, the data set. I could choose culture shoutouts demo, so on and so forth. So when that changes, it's going to automatically refresh the data set, and then I could hit save if it was actually working properly, or set up properly rather, and then that refresh will happen dynamically. It's a pretty awesome feature that not many people know about. It's really amazing. Definitely would recommend checking it out. Because it is awesome. Now that being said, refreshes, especially if you're on Pro and not on Premium, refreshes don't, even though they trigger immediately, refreshes don't always happen immediately. So sometimes you might notice that sometimes you might schedule a refresh for, let's hypothetically say like noon. Well, that refresh might not happen until 12:15 or 12:30. Now this is just because especially if you're on Pro, there might be other resources that Azure is being tied up with right now for whatever your shared capacity is with whatever like you're connected to in the Azure side on all your storage services there. So the refreshes don't happen literally instantly. They can, but not always. So just keep that in mind when you're like, hey, something, I set up this flow and I made a change and it's not happening. It's what's going on. Give it up to 15, 30 minutes because, like I said, the Azure load just could be high right now at this time. So sometimes you just have to give it a little bit of time. Can you force a refresh on the service is a question that someone asked. Yes, you can. So in the service itself, you can actually see there's several ways you could do it. How I do it is if I go to a workspace, go down to the dataset section. If I look at this culture shoutouts example, I click this little ellipses here, and you could hit refresh now. That means, oh, this data is going to check to see if the data set's been updated, and it's going to force a data refresh. You can do it from there. You can do it from, like your homes page. You can browse out that way, and there's like new menus you can look at. There's several ways you can do it to force refreshes, but yes, you can. All right, so someone asked, I'm not sure the difference between the data or the drive. What is not refreshing in this case? I'm assuming this is talking about when the OneDrive refreshes. So if I make changes to this Power BI file that exists here, if I make changes to this Power BI file and I save it, so basically what happens is Power BI tenant looks at OneDrive and says, oh, this data was updated at 11:30 a.m. on December 10th, right? Okay, so because that change happened, let me make a refresh here. Whatever's in that Power BI file, we're gonna transmit that directly to the service. And that being said, it's only based on this exact time. So if this time changes, if I hit save again, if I hit save right now, it would say 11:38 a.m. Well, Power BI will be like, oh, the last change was made at 11:30. Well, there's a new change at 11:38. That's a new updated time. So let me pull that in. So everything, including whatever's in that, however this Power BI file looks literally at this time, is what gets changed to this, automatically updated on the service. Now, this does not necessarily mean a data refresh happens, because I could hit save right now. If I hit save, you'll see that this goes to 11:39 a.m. on date modified. But what I didn't do is I didn't refresh the data, right? I didn't actually hit data refresh. I didn't actually refresh the data set itself, so to see if there's been any new shoutouts received. I didn't do that. But the Power BI tenant doesn't know I didn't do that. It's just saying, oh, this has been changed. It's a new version. Let me pull that new version into the service. Now, a data refresh, on the other hand, doing like a scheduled refresh or that Power Automate type of refresh that I showed you guys earlier. Now, that is actually a data set refresh. So even if this Power BI file that I have right here hasn't been touched for weeks, if the underlying data set changes, whether it's an Excel file, whether it's, you know, a SharePoint list or a SQL server, that scheduled refresh or that flow refresh will actually be able to see that and be like, oh, this data is different. Let me update that data directly to the service, even though this Power BI file doesn't actually make a difference. It doesn't actually change. In the cloud, is that only Azure? Yes, it is only Azure. Yes, that is correct. Not that I'm not entirely sure if Flow has that capability. I know, for instance, you can do it from SharePoint. I know you can do it from SQL Server. That's something I'd have to check. If you want to like send me an email, I can certainly look into that for you. Inley at pragmaticworks.com. We still have a few things I want to go over here. We'll work through that. Essentially, it's republishing a file to the service. Yes, that is a good way to put it. Mark says essentially is that republishing the file to the service. So yeah, that is a good way to put it. So if I save it to my OneDrive, that's exactly what it does. It's a republish, but I just don't have to hit this publish button, choose my workspace, put it in there, override, etc. Gotcha, that makes sense. Thank you for explaining that. No problem. For example, let's see here. For example, I may create a new chart or graph. When I save the file, then I'll have to typically have to republish. Will this auto refresh eliminate that need? I believe so. Yes, it should automatically update that visual. Like I said, this is a pretty new feature. I haven't tested it fully. I've done some preliminary stuff, like with, you know, simple visual changes and whatnot. But yes, technically or theoretically, hypothetically, however you want to say it, it should auto refresh that visual change if you save it on your OneDrive. All right, next thing I want to talk to you guys about here is a couple more things. This next topic is pretty quick. There's some new capacity settings that are set up for Power BI Premium. I'm not actually going to go into a demo on this because, you know, not everyone has Power BI Premium, and it's kind of a lot. So what I want to talk about here, as of August this year, there's 5 new Power BI Premium capacity settings that are available in the portal. Now, there's automatically preloaded with some default values, but what happens is an admin of your Power BI tenant can review and or override the defaults with whatever the preferences for the company to better protect the capacity from running into problems and issues or whatever it is before they arise, or, you know, also proactively or reactively make changes here. Unfortunately, at the time of delivering this right now, I don't actually have premium capacity set up anyways where I can modify this as an admin. A lot of times I will, just right now I don't, so I actually can't go into these settings if I wanted to as a demo anyways, but I do have some screenshots to utilize here. So essentially, as an admin, you can find these new settings in the admin portal. You go to the admin portal, then you can go to capacity settings. You could expand the workload chevron that's there on the management tab to be able to view these options. But essentially, there's like 5 big things that are different here. You can, the main one here is the most requested part, is the one that I have an arrow pointing to, which is you could change the max offline data set size. With the allowable range from anywhere from 0.1 to 10 gigabytes, or 0.1 gigabytes to 10 gigabytes of usage. By default, a capacity will have 10 gigabytes of usage. And then you can even set limits on different queries to prevent noisy reports from impacting others. So you can use these new settings to create, you know, a way more predictable and better performing capacity for your company, for your organization. So when users are experiencing like a bunch of slowness that's going on, for instance, on a large data set that's taking up a lot of resources, like the first thing an admin will typically do is, you know, identify the culprits of like who the problem children are, and either reallocate those resources to a different capacity or set this data set size down, lower that data set size to make it smaller so it's not that big of a deal. You can also change the query limit size, which is mainly for DAX calculations. Basically, it limits how much temporary memory a DAX calculation can use at one time. So, like if you're running an iterating calculation of a large data set, so like a nested conditional logic based calculation, you can better control like what kind of impact that calculation has on a report. You can also set up a query timeout. So when users, in seconds rather, so when users are experiencing like some type of spinning or loading on the report due to another report that's like expensive in resources, admins can move those workspaces to a different capacity, or with this new setting, admin could control them more with, setting of timeout times. Like if this is taking this long to run, kill it. So that definitely helps a lot. You can also set up I'm not going to go into details on these last ones, but you can change the max intermediate row set count, which is for direct query. It sets a max number of details or a max number of rows returned by direct query, and then max result row set count, which defines the maximum number of rows returned in a DAX query. These are all things you can do in Power BI Premium and a premium capacity, also Power BI embedded capacity to kind of make things run faster. This is a pretty common issue that comes up with a lot of larger companies. And the last thing I want to really go over here is bookmarks. So in the service, there's been quite a few bookmarks changes. Well, not quite a few. There's been two big bookmarks changes on how they're utilized. One of those is a personal bookmarks, which is cool for a user. Like if you're consuming a report like regularly, you can set up your own bookmarks in the report. And if you don't know what a bookmark is, I'll show you guys. It's kind of a way you can kind of like, it's an aspect of digital storytelling where you can actually kind of set up things in a certain way to kind of tell a story or find certain answers that you're looking for. So there's a lot of personalization there with personal bookmarks. But the thing that is a little controversial is all bookmarks in a report are now visible by everyone. So you might have a certain bookmark set up in such a way that you can only get to these bookmarks by a very select type of way. You shouldn't just be able to go to a bookmark, like any bookmark you want to report just because you want to. And that Culture Shoutouts demo or report that I have is a perfect example. We kind of go through these things here. So the last thing we're going to do here is, go over a demo for these bookmarks changes because in my opinion, they're a pretty big deal. So let's check that out. So in the service, here is our report that we've been looking at. Like I said, this month, this year, these buttons on the left side are bookmarks, is what they are. This month, this year, all time, custom range, these are bookmarks, right? This little eye bubble here, if I click it, it's a bookmark. So it says information there. So these are all different bookmarks that I have set up. Now, while it only looks like a few different ones, there's actually a kind of complex sequence of how things kind of work across different pages. So as you can see on this report, look at all these pages that I have. So on this report, this is that demo, this is that example we're looking at in the service. So you see all these hidden pages that I have? Hidden, and even more hidden stuff. Got a bunch of hidden pages here, but they're navigated from bookmarks. So for instance, in my actual desktop report, if I click all time, you can see I'm actually on a different page. I'm on this hidden all time page that you should only be able to get there by clicking this all time button on the left side. All right, that's how this bookmark's set up. But in the service, look how many pages I have. 1, 2, 3. I have this set up in a very specific way for a very specific reason because I wanted this to navigate how I wanted to navigate. So that's great. But if I look at the bookmark section on the top right, this little bookmarks drop down, there's two options that we have: add a personal bookmark and show more bookmarks. So let's look at show more bookmarks. Let's look at that first. So if I click show more bookmarks, now suddenly all the bookmarks I have set up that I have labeled for use on this report are now visible by anyone who consumes this report. And I can't stop it. It's just there. It's a feature that's now baked into the service. So I don't want people to see these bookmarks and go to these bookmarks I have set up in a very specific way because I set them up this way for ease of navigation. Now, someone might get to this bookmarks pane, especially if things aren't labeled correctly or they're not familiar with the nomenclature. They can start clicking around, and some of this stuff might not make sense, right? So this is something that it's cool in the sense that, like, if you set up bookmarks and a way other than how I have it here as like a usability. If you set your bookmarks up in such a way that's kind of like a presentation style of bookmarks, this is a nice little feature, but I wish there was a way to kind of turn it off for the report, because currently there isn't one. But that's, it is what it is. That's kind of there now. So that's just that feature that's there. But this other really cool thing is personal bookmarks. So if I click this drop down again and go to add a personal bookmark, what I could do is I could set up, I want a bookmark to only show Joe, Andy, and Erica's stuff here on this year page. Hypothetically speaking, I can go to bookmarks, add a personal bookmark, and I could call it Joe, Andy, Erica. See, I can see it. That's the name of it that I'm calling it here. And I could hit save. And now, at any time from anywhere I am, I can go to bookmarks. I can click on my personal bookmark of Joe, Andy, Erica. When I click on it, it's going to go to this year, Joe, Andy, Erica. And I can set those up as many times as I want, and they're only usable by me, because I set it up as a personal bookmark in the service. Now, anyone can go in here and say, I like to look at things a very specific way. There isn't a bookmark currently set up that does what I'm trying to do exactly. So you can set up those personal bookmarks right then and there, and it's a very nice feature to be able to have and kind of utilize it whenever you want, or whoever can use it whenever they want. So it's pretty awesome. Personal bookmarks is a great addition to the service. Highly, highly, highly recommend, showing your end users of your reports, or if you're an end user, utilizing this feature to kind of cut the data into exactly how you want to see it. All right, so that being said, that's all we have time for today. So let's see what else we've got. Someone asked, do you have any tips on how to manage these capacity settings? I find it difficult to know when I should touch them, and I don't want to cause chaos. That is a great question. It is one of those things that it's definitely going to take, depending on your company and the different business rules that you have at your company. I hate to say it this way, but a lot of times there's a lot of trial and error involved with this. Like, hey, these reports are running slow. Let me cut down some of these settings to, 90% of what they are regularly, and you just kind of have to test it out sometimes and see if it works for you. If things kind of start to break, okay, maybe we should revert it. Unfortunately, there's no kind of guideline as of yet, because these settings are so new, and when they're so new, there's no like benchmarks that are automatically there to just like, you used X amount of data, you should probably try this. It might automatically, start working better for you. There's no kind of like predictive help that exists currently, and hopefully that's something that does come out soon. So unfortunately, I don't have any really big tips for that. And that's the last question that I see so far. It is a really good question, and unfortunately, there's not a really good answer for that yet, because these settings are so new. All right, so if there's any more questions, feel free to ask before we close this up. Again, guys, if you have any questions, and a couple of you I said to send me an email, so go ahead and send me an email if you have any more questions about this webinar. Be sure to follow me on Twitter. Like I said, I post updates really regularly on the Microsoft BI Stack. Pretty active on there. You get a lot of new news from me and blog posts and whatnot from me if you follow my Twitter. How has visibility of all bookmarks affected how you present bookmarks? Seeing as nothing can be done about not making them invisible, just don't include bookmarks you don't want viewers to see. Yes, so if you have bookmarks set up, if you don't want viewers to see something very specific that you set up in a bookmark, don't include it. And unfortunately, that's really the only workaround for it. There's something that, like there's different nomenclature practices that you could do. You could try to be as descriptive as possible with your bookmark so people know what they're clicking on. You could try to be as vague as possible with your bookmark. So maybe people would be like, I don't know what this is, so I'm not going to click it. Or if they do click it, they don't know what it is. Like I said, unfortunately, I wish there was a way to say, do I want my bookmarks visible by everyone who views this report? Yes or no, because it makes a big difference. And like I said, it's a new feature. A lot of times these new features are just like thrown into the service or whatever it may be, and there's not really many customizable options off the bat. But yeah, so if you have any bookmarks set up that you don't want your viewers to see, don't publish it that way. Only put in bookmarks that are specific to what the user should be able to see. Looking at the reports from the dashboard, the new look is great and it looks clean, but when it's a full screen view, the new look doesn't allow us to see the bottom of the report. Is there another way to fix it? I'm not so sure about that. Let's see here. I can see the, oh, you're right. Yeah, it does cut it off. I didn't notice that before. I'm trying to hold control and zoom out, and it's not helping. Huh. I guess zooming out does help some. Eventually, it does get to a point where I can see it. All right, so looks like no more questions so far. There is one more cool thing. So we got a couple minutes. I want to show you guys one more cool little thing. There's something called custom branding that exists here in the Power BI service. It's pretty sweet. Let me zoom in some so it's not so like small. Everything's not so small. So check this out, guys. One more bonus tip for everyone that's still here. Check it out. If I go to my admin portal, if you're an admin, you could do this. If I go to my admin portal and go to this option down here that says custom branding. If I go to custom branding, we could actually customize your Power BI tenant to look a certain way. To an extent, it's a pretty small extent, but I could upload a logo. So like my Pragmatic Works logo blue, this is what it looks like. It's tiny right here, but you'll see it in a second. I can also add a cover image that I have set up, like this little banner I have set up that I also use in my email, but this is what the banner looks like. And I could change the theme color of my Power BI tenant to like a gray or something. You can make it whatever color you want. And if I hit publish, now if I refresh my page and go back to the home page of my Power BI portal, now see I have this logo. It says Pragmatic Works on the top left. I have this banner that I set up here at the top, and this whole setting's all gray. Now this is actually applied to everyone at my company. So if you're an admin, you can set up logos and colors to a small extent to everyone at your company. That just like if anyone at Pragmatic Works right now looks at Power BI, this is what they'd see. So it's pretty cool. You could do that, you know, to kind of spice your stuff up a little bit. It's pretty sweet. And also don't forget that you can also set up themes on dashboards. So themes on dashboards, you could also even add images to your dashboards, even GIFs. See this GIF here? The Star Wars shout out for everyone watching Mandalorian. All right. But yeah, so you could add themes to your dashboards. You could add pictures, logos, whatever you want. You could add you could add these banners on your Power BI pages. You can add little logos. It's pretty nice little clean it up. It's pretty cool stuff. Someone said I missed the branding. Can you run through it again? Yeah, so what you do, if you're an admin, you could click on this little gear on the top right corner. You could go to the admin portal, and then you could choose custom branding. And you could choose like your logos and your banners and your colors and stuff that you want to do from right here. And I'm just going to go ahead and remove all this stuff. Put it back to normal. If I hit refresh, there we go, back to normal color schemes, no new logos or anything like that. But yeah, that's it for time today, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Again, please follow me on Twitter at Back2SQL, and to get all the latest Power BI news and Microsoft Azure news. And thank you so much. And Crystal, if you want to take it over.
Yeah, thank you so much for hosting, Nick. We really appreciate it. And like Nick was saying earlier, you guys will receive the recording in your email. For those of you who are wondering if this is recorded, it is. So you guys will receive it tomorrow in your inbox. So please stay tuned for that. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Nick or myself. I hope you guys have a great rest of your Tuesday. And I hope to see you guys next week in the next webinar. Thanks again, Nick. We appreciate it. And you guys have a wonderful day.